Bonjour! Welcome to the third part of France. After learning the basic national conditions and the distinctive culture of France, it is not hard to see why France is such a charming country. In this session, we are going to learn the relationship and cultural exchanges and mutual learning between China and France. Firstly, let's take a look at the special China-France ties. In 2022, China and France marked 58 years of friendship between the two countries. France was one of the first developed countries to forge full diplomatic ties with China in the 1960s. There are many other firsts that France has made with China. France is the first Western country to have established a comprehensive strategic partnership with China. The first Western country to open direct flights with China, the first country to exchange with China in hosting the Cultural Year and setting up cultural centers, and also the first major Western country to conduct youth exchanges with China. The two countries now boast 102 pairs of sister cities and provinces. In 2018, nearly 40,000 Chinese students were studying in France. More than 100,000 French students were studying Chinese, and a record number of Chinese tourists visited France. Secondly, cultural exchanges and mutual learning. France and China have maintained friendly bilateral relations for a long time, and both of them are countries with time-honored culture and history. Actually, the similarities between China and France are impressive in many ways. Culturally, both Chinese and French people have created splendid histories and culture over the past 2,000 years. As the cradle of Oriental civilization, China has exerted a great influence on the cultures of Asia and the world. For France, it has been the center of Western culture since the Mid-Ages, which has had a profound influence on Europe and even the rest of the world. With the establishment of formal diplomatic ties, people of both countries have the opportunity to experience and explore each other's culture. For example, French cuisine has been integrated into Chinese food culture. Oysters are the prime example. France is rich in oysters and maintains a tradition of eating them raw. In the 1990s, people in China did not know much about oysters in general, much less eating them uncooked. In order to let Chinese people enjoy fresh oysters, the restaurant Flo-Maison, which opened in Beijing in 1999, set a precedent for the Chinese restaurant to import oysters by air. Nowadays, Chinese people are familiar with oysters and even created their own way to cook them. Oysters are now no longer just a fancy ingredient in many dining rooms, but can also be seen in many food stores on the sidewalks of China. While oysters have just recently entered Chinese food culture, Chinese tea has long been a part of French life. In 1636, the Dutch merchant brought Chinese tea to Paris. Since then, the French began to drink tea. For a long time, tea was considered an aristocratic drink, even a luxury. In recent decades, the French began to show strong interest in Chinese tea culture. Now the country has become one of the 4 major tea-drinking countries in Europe. When it comes to the people who have made contributions to the cultural exchanges and mutual learning between China and France, we have to mention the famous French sinologist Joël Bellasson and work-study movement 100 years ago. Joël Bellasson is a French sinologist and a professor of Chinese at the National Institute for Oriental Languages and Civilizations in Paris, and the first Inspector General in the field of Chinese language teaching at the French Ministry of Education. He was among the first batch of students sent to China after the establishment of diplomatic relations. After graduation, he became France's first Chinese language teacher at the kindergarten and primary school level and was appointed as the very first Inspector General of Chinese language teaching in 2006. He has since devoted himself to promoting Chinese language learning in France. Roy once remarked, "China, like France, is a very ancient country with a long history. Both value their historical records and cultural heritage. French people pay great respect to countries with history." It was in this frame of mind that I started to learn this remote language. Today, 600 middle schools are offering Chinese courses, making Chinese the first language ever to enjoy such rapidly increasing attention in foreign language education in France. Surpassing Portuguese, Hebrew, and Arabic, Chinese has risen to 5th place as a foreign language most used in France. His efforts are one of the reasons France is able to keep its lead in Europe in Chinese teaching. Roy believes Chinese language learning has a bright future in France, and he often says, "You will definitely come into contact with China in the future." In France, Chinese language and culture transmission is like a satellite moving fast on the right track and constantly speeding up. Then, I'd like to tell the story about former leaders and some famous people studying in France. Nearly 100 years ago, groups of Chinese young people harboring the dream of saving the nation traveled far away abroad to learn new ideas. They worked in factories in Paris, Lyon, and Montargis to pay for their study of French culture and Western science. Some of them became interested in and began to study Marxism and established one of the earliest Chinese Communist Party groups in France. The movement produced a number of important socialist leaders, revolutionary cadres, and leading scientists. Among these prominent figures are late Chinese leaders Zhou Enlai and Deng Xiaoping, scientists Qian Sanqiang and Yan Jicci, artists Xu Beihong and Xian Xinhai, writers Ba Jing and Qian Zhongshu. The work-study movement in France was an important event in Chinese modern history, which was significant in the establishment of the Communist Party of China and an excellent model for Chinese students studying abroad. It has also promoted cultural and people-to-people exchanges between the two sides. A ceremony and a series of events were held at the Chinese Cultural Center in Paris in 2019 to mark the centennial of the work-study movement. The Chinese Cultural Center also saw the premiere of the TV documentary introducing the movement's history. The documentary was jointly produced by the French channel of China CGTN and the French TV5 Monde. It featured historical video clips and narrations by the descendants of the movement's participants. This large-scale French work-study movement is the beginning of the modern study abroad in France. It was not only a journey of faith that ignited ideals, but also a journey of mutual learning between civilizations. The spirit of this work-study movement is that as the world situation grows more tense, more support for cooperation and multilateralism is needed. Okay, by telling the stories of people from the two countries, we have learned more about the cultural exchanges and mutual learning between China and France. Hopefully, you now have a comprehensive and in-depth understanding of France and the relationship between the two countries. See you next time.